Welcome to the Go-to-Market Hive Mind podcast. Every single episode, we invite a guest specialist on board to talk about one specific area that is related to how fintechs and SaaS and software businesses can grow and scale revenue teams. This week, we've got an episode that's very close to my heart. We're talking about how to grow pre-sales teams. Anyone that's been involved in enterprise sales will know how critical subject matter experts are to the whole process. Our two guests this week are very special. We have Alexey Lapusta of Plumery, who was previously the founding creator of the pre-sales team at Mambu and took them all the way up to their 5 billion valuation as the global head of pre-sales. We also have Bultot, who is the head of pre-sales at Backbase, and equally he's been there from day one all the way through up to their current position worth over 2.5 billion. So we've got two pre-sales experts, royalty if you will, today. Guys, thank you very much for joining us today. Let's get started. So I think one of the biggest things that I've experienced in growing businesses is a lot of the time companies don't know when the right time to create that team is. So Alexey, from Mambu's perspective, what advice would you give if you're perhaps a seed or a Series A business? When's a good time to really form a pre-sales team?
Sure, James. I started at Mambu, I think it was Series B, and right now at Plumery, we are seed stage. So I can definitely tell you that at the seed level, the founder is typically the one who should be doing the majority of the sales and pre-sales, focusing on finding that product market fit. And the Series A, that's exactly the time then founders start to look at building the solution engineering or the pre-sales team. And from my experience, kind of the best recommendation is also to start looking for different triggers for that. So for example, if you have a really complex product and it takes a lot of time for the account executives that you onboarded at Series A to run the POC, do their RFPs, and you really want to free up their time on the business development, that may be one good trigger. Another one that we see as kind of the pre-sales team are also doing a lot of post-sales work in some organizations with customer success or with implementations. You may be lucky if you find a pre-sales person who can do post-sales and do actually some of your first implementations, because that definitely help with that continuity on the customer journey and kind of ensure the smooth onboarding, especially in kind of the first customers where things may be a bit more rough and some things that may be not yet ready.
Great. I think that's a really interesting point there, Alexey. We often call them pre-sales, implying that they have this limited role right up until the sale is made and then never speak to the customer again. But, it doesn't have to be the case. So Robin, when did the pre-sales team Backbase form? And, in its current form, is it purely a pre-sales team or do you, stay with the customer for longer than that?
Yeah, so this has changed over time. I would say that in the beginning, it was purely pre-sales. It was just working up to the deal. But you see more and more that the success of a customer is also needs a pre-sales after the deal. So I would say, I think the first 4 or 5 years was really purely pre-sales. And I think by now, we also don't call it pre-sales anymore. It's solution engineering, which is pre and post-sales. But yeah, I think for a long time, we're already doing both.
Okay. And is that working with customer success from an ongoing customer basis? What are the support teams that kind of wrap around your?
Yeah, so there's different ways to work with pre-sales. In some cases, dependent on the organization, you might have one person doing activities. In our case, we have an account team. And as part of the account team, pre or post-sales, you have a solution engineer or architect who is assigned to that account. So if customer success comes in afterwards, you will still have an architect available from the solution engineering team.
Yeah, so Backbase is quite a deep technology. It's very kind of enterprise grade. Do you think that is something that is like a universal rule that you would recommend for any pre-sales function, or do you think it's really kind of more specific to the deeper tech?
I think if you have a simpler product, there's not as much need to have the same information post-sales. I think with more complex enterprise software, yes, you will need to have that information to go from pre-sales to post-sales.
Great. And in terms of how those functions, particularly how sales, like on the run up to the contract signature, engage with pre-sales, what have you learned? I mean, if I can be a little bit leading with one example, like RFPs, these are kind of very subject matter expert geared exercises, and it can be a little bit messy in terms of ownership. Like, what are your views, Robin, on like how the sales organization and pre-sales need to interface to kind of avoid conflict or duplication or anything like that?
I would say the ownership is always with the sales responsible. So, if in your region there's an RFP, the account executive is responsible for that RFP. However, the content for the larger part needs to be filled in by a solution engineer or someone from delivery or legal. Now, I think a better thing to talk about is for some businesses, you fill in these RFPs all the time, but we really decided that we want to make sure that we influence RFPs. So I think 5 years ago, we would have like 200, 300 RFPs we would do per year with a very low success rate. Now, the moment you're going to select target accounts you're going to work on and they know you help influence the RFP or RFI. And then you will see that it's much easier to navigate through this RFP. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So I think what you're suggesting is rather than waiting for a set of requirements to kind of land on your email, you kind of proactively seek out the customer to shape those requirements in collaboration. Am I putting words in your mouth, or is that basically right?
No, my view on RFPs really changed. We did so many RFPs. We had so many people working on RFPs, but I think the success rate was so low that we turned it around. Let's help accounts which we want to work with to make sure that we create initiatives together with them. And as part of the process, you will get an RFP.
Great. And Alexey, what are your thoughts?
I think when we look at RFPs, it's great to be in a position when you can define that, when you are a category leader, whether it's Forrester, Gartner, or you have folks like McKinsey who basically help kind of to put your vision that it really fits like a glove. Unfortunately, on the growth stage, many of the startups are not really in that position yet. They may be just defining that kind of term, whether it's engagement banking or composable banking or many other things that we heard. And during that period, I think from kind of my early days as an individual contributor, all solution engineers are those perfectionists with deadlines. And actually time management when doing the RFPs is often a tough one. And I've always was very against us having like a dedicated bid management team. But I think some things really changed also with the industry. And what I mean by that, there are some tools that really help with collaboration within, let's say, RFP units. So you may have product marketing, which is working on actual reusable content that could be used. But also, if you look at bid managers as project managers, it actually takes a lot of pressure out of the project. It still doesn't change the responsibility. Responsibility is still an account executive to make sure that it's sent out on time. It's still a solution engineer to fill certain sections, but with combination, and we can talk about tooling later, of generative AI, and when the bid manager is more like project manager and just ensuring that they can go to all the different points to gather this data, I think it's really helped to take valuable time of solution engineers, make it focus on a bit more value-added activities, and also take pressure from everyone, because they're just taking it as yet another project that comes in. And maybe other parts about the other departments, but maybe we can talk a bit later.
That's a really good point, actually. The issue of bid managers, and one of my personal views is, well, if there's a bid manager doing the project management, what's happening to the salesperson? I mean, I was always of the opinion that the salesperson needs to read between the lines. Like, you obviously get sent a document, but you also need to determine what's not asked for that you need to respond. And my concern would be if you kind of chuck that over the fence to a bid manager, you're kind of removing, the the insight that an account executive is meant to bring. I don't know. What do you guys think?
No, I agree with you. I think it's more not kind of a classic bid management team where you kind of just give them the document and they get something back that you send out, but more in terms of like orchestrating the process. So bid manager just going to ensure that there's a latest template, because we all know like account executive always stick to that winning RFP template that they got one big deal with. And sometimes they don't really like to update it because there are all those small things. So it's more like laying the foundation, like refilling it. So when the AE actually starts to work on the RFP, they already have that kind of very good baseline, and they can really focus on that executive summary, something that everyone definitely going to read. Robin, what do you think?
Robin, do you guys use bid managers now, or?
No, not anymore. So we had bid management for a few years, and the role became obsolete about a year ago. I really think that if you're working at Microsoft and have like 128 products which are involved, you need someone to orchestrate. And in Backbase, of course, we have quite some products, but let's say that it's like 14 products we can look at. I think that's something which is still small enough for a solution engineer to manage, right? Or to have a few solution engineers to work on it. So for us, I think the bid manager was too much of a heavy role for the amount of products we offer.
Great. And Alexey, you've just talked about tooling. Like I'm a little bit out of the loop here in the fact that generative AI has, got a number of use cases, and it feels like RFP responses is, a huge opportunity, but also potentially a big risk. So, what are the latest tools that you guys are seeing that can help solution engineers? So Alexey, do you want to take this one first?
Sure. I think the solution engineering profession is definitely changing, because if you go back 10 years, the majority of the work, as Robin was saying, like it's answering to hundreds of RFPs and doing hundreds of demos. I think this is where the most exciting part nowadays is coming to the role, is the automation that's happening both the RFP space and in the demo space. If we look for the demo space, I think you probably can now find like close to a dozen companies who are doing that. And they actually fit different types of software. So if you have something that's API first, there's a really cool company called Post that helps you to, like in a Figma, build a non-existent UI for your software and actually this way demonstrate the API capability of it. If you look at the other spectrum where you have a very complex products, like for example, Zendesk, they're using a company called Testbot, which pretty much allows you to demonstrate the real software with pre-filled data. And of course, in the middle, you have different companies that are doing more like a video recording to your UI type of thing. So you need to be, of course, very strategic when how you use the automation. Same for the RFPs. There are tools like Lupio and RFP.io that can write the RFP for you. But I think this is the exciting part where now we have those tools so we can actually experiment. And depending on the ticket sale, there's a good opportunity for CROs to actually see how they can potentially go into lower market and lower the cost of sale to actually make the solution affordable for other markets where previously just couldn't do that because you would need that whole team sitting around that.
Great. And Robin, what are the must-have tools that you guys are using?
Yeah, so on the tooling side, it's what Alexey says. There's a lot of tools out there, and I think most of them do the same, and I now also to their feature set. Now, maybe I have a question for you. What's the most important piece of an RFP? Now you get an RFP, 1,000 line items. There's 5 sections in there. What's the most important piece?
Wow, now you're putting me on the spot. Well, I think I always look for bonus points in responding to an RFP. It's so, opportunities to personalize. So in the requirements, what are the things that they're potentially not asking? So they might look for features and functions of the software, but what they're not asking or sometimes fail to ask, but will want to know is how the solution is going to be deployed. Like how do you de-risk implementation and things like that? So, that's one of the key things that I always look to address. It sounds like that was, maybe a loaded question that you've got like one item that you clearly think is up there.
No, so I asked these questions also during onboarding and stuff because I think Your answer is right. So the unconsidered needs are most important. The RFP and the Excel sheet are for us to make sure that we're not being disqualified. There's a scoring, and in the end, you need to have a high score so you're not being disqualified. Now, the additional document with the executive summary, that's where you're going to differentiate, right? No AI is going to write this for you. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that with this AI tools, you want to make sure that you're going to score enough not to be disqualified, but the differentiation you do in the additional document, making sure that you put yourself higher than the composition, or you have these unconsidered needs which you can explain there.
Yeah. And I think there's always the risk with generative AI that you get really fast at doing average stuff. And I think one of the things that I always look to do in RFPs was use imagery. So they give you a spreadsheet, and it's very easy to just kind of pump a wall of text into that. But actually, if you present it really clearly, or the responses using diagrams and other visuals, that's something that I think is a lot harder for an AI to do, although it's probably going to happen at some point, right?
Yeah. And there's, of course, if you answer an RFP exactly according to documentation, you don't take into account the roadmap, what is going to be released within the following 6 months. So I think there's a bit of nuance when responding to an RFP.
Yeah, you still need the individual's intuition to kind of read between the lines. Yeah. And what's the profile of a kind of a great solution engineer? I mean, we know that that person's gonna need to be a subject matter expert, but beyond that, what are the intrinsic characteristics and skills that you look for, Robin?
So for me, it's still DNA and culture. I much rather have someone who isn't super skilled or has all the domain knowledge out there, but is the best presenter and the person walking away with the CTO during the lunch break, right? So for me, number one is being a likable person. And I think, that's also within the customer advisory group in Backbase. Most important is the well-being of the individual. I think these things are most important. And of course, then you get to the piece like active listening, and then you get to the piece of some of them being a technical expert, or some of them being a banking expert, right? But I think for me, the first few blocks is just personality, DNA.
How do you have you developed ways that you evaluate that in an interview process? Because what you're describing is quite, intangible.
Uh-huh. Imagine working with someone you don't know. You need to work with someone quite intense, right? So you have your solution engineer and you're working side by side 40 hours a week. If you don't know anything about the person, it's kind of hard to know whether there's a good fit or not. So you can ask about the technology stack, about whatever skill sets this person has. My interviews are more than half of the interview. What are you doing when you're not working? Tell me what you do. Tell me your interests, hobbies, family, whatever you do over the weekend. Have you planned holidays? What kind of music do you like? I try to just get an image of the person. And then when I think this person might fit the team well, then we're going to dive into, let's say, the skills we're looking for.
Wow. Good approach. Alexey, any tips and tricks for, picking the best talent?
Yeah, I think as Robin mentioned, well-rounded, or I would rather say balanced person with technical expertise, business acumen, and emotional intelligence is kind of what we are aiming for. And we also learned that if the people are joining and they may be not best fit for pre-sale, they usually move into other organizations within the company. So it could be sales, if they're really more on that kind of business like sales side, or maybe professional services, sometimes even to product. And so having a high bar for pre-sales sometimes also allows you to bring a lot of great talent into the company, but also the same way, kind of the other way out, you can look into people in other parts of the organization to join the solution engineering team. That's actually how I joined the SE team at Backbase when Robin brought me from another department. But at the same time, I also think that is kind of if you look more at the senior pre-sales people, so senior pre-sales solution architect, this is also where understanding the industry and the ability to explain complex things is becoming more and more important. Because if we are moving into the value selling, and really talking about the pains that people have. Unless you worked as a pre-sales in the industry for a certain amount of time, or you've been on the other side, it would be very hard kind of to communicate beyond the pitch on some of those problems, and sometimes really to do a very good discovery, just kind of catching those different things that might help you to figure out what's the actual big problem or the big challenge within the organization.
I've got a contentious or potentially contentious question. So, can you be a great pre-sales leader if you haven't done the job yourself? Robin?
No. No, because I think one of the things, just adding also to the piece which Alexey was explaining, one of the parts which is something which is hard to measure or to test, there's a lot of stakeholder management involved. So that's stakeholders on the customer side, but also internal. So you get a lot of, I think nowadays, the issues I'm facing mostly have to do with stakeholder management. So that can be people in other departments, or your sales rep who is asking you something, or the relation between the sales and the SE doesn't work well. So also connecting to the last question, I think to become a very good pre-sales or to find a good pre-sales, you need to find someone who's very good at stakeholder management, internal as well as external.
Yeah, sounds fair. And from a performance perspective, the contribution that pre-sales make is I don't think anyone would argue that it's massive. How do you quantify that? How do you know when a pre-sales team is performing or not performing, and separate that from perhaps the performance of the account executive or other aspects of the business? How do you guys track that as leaders? Sorry, Alexey.
It's a tough one because I may go a bit against the grain here. For me, the performance management is challenging in our profession. I may even say it's kind of a bit of a play, because if you're putting pre-sales team purely under the sales organization, and if you're just doing all the justifications based on the revenue, like the head count justifications, or maybe additional metrics like number of demos, etc., I think that may take your sales up to a certain level, but it wouldn't take your organization that far. And for me, the product adoption metrics, and that's why it's very important to have the communication between the pre-sales team and the customer success and the product team, to basically ensure that what has been sold been implemented, and that the product team is not learning from the customers what they need to build, but they're getting those insights early from solution engineers. The way you can design your kind of performance management or compensation or different incentives linked to those things, I think would be the better for the organization at large. But that's something I think it's quite often overlooked by the CROs.
Robin, what do you reckon?
Yeah, it is challenging. So there's a few factors. One is, of course, the amount of deals. I think that's always the big number. In Backbase, we also have a skills matrix. So, our competency framework allows us to map against the people we have, and also to provide them a career path, right? So still, it's a bit subjective. Still, you need to make sure that you're in those meetings, or you need to get the feedback from the people in the field, how someone performs, or where we might have a weak spot in knowledge. So I'm with Alexey. It's challenging.
But it is something that you've developed a continuous feedback cycle to. So it's not, there aren't characteristics that you just kind of pull out of thin air when the person's not meeting them. It is something that you measure over time.
It's something we measure, and so there's another few things here. So over time, when you start with a smaller company startup, you will have pre-sales, and they're like 5 chiefs, right? So they know all products inside out. That's also how we started. But at a certain moment, you get to a product portfolio where you need to have a domain knowledge, and then you get the experts. So you don't want to have everyone to be level 3 ninja on corporate banking. You might want to have a corporate banking specialist. So at a certain moment, you're going to hire specialists with their own career framework. So they're being tested in a different way. Same as solution engineers versus architects. Architects have a different career framework. And since last year, we also heard Alexey say something about that. We also have that reflected in the compensation frame. So that also means that individual contributions will also be rewarded.
So not just team targets, it's the individual and the team.
Now, for 12 years, we had team targets. And now for the first time, we found a way to also have individual contributors to be rewarded. Yep.
Okay. And that's something that you're piloting? Are you like at the point where you'd say surefire recommendation, or should we talk again in 12 months?
We for sure should talk about in 12 months. I've always been looking for a reason for a solution engineer to be more motivated to get a deal in. And I think for quite a long time, the solution engineers have been working in a transactional manner. And since 3 years, we have account teams. So from the very beginning, you're going to be part of that account team. And I also want the person who walks the extra mile on that account to also be rewarded that way. Okay.
Where do you sit on this, Alexey? Team remuneration or individual?
Don't get me wrong, we have both. So like half of it is team, half of it is individual.
No, I think it's great because with team, you have way more collaboration. If you go kind of just personal versus team, at the more complex kind of domain you work with, that's where you're looking for that more collaboration, because you may have payment experts, you may have accounting experts, or like a vertical retail versus commercial banking experts, and you don't want to be by your compensation design kind of limited with that. I think that the biggest challenge is to change the comp plan kind of to go beyond things related to revenue, whether it's like a career framework, as Robin mentioned, or being able to influence like product features, or being able to influence successful implementations. So I think the ideal kind of comp scenario of LSCs would include all of those. But unfortunately, that we see mostly in the industries like 80-20 or 30-70 into kind of group or target revenue, and then the base salary.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a huge fan personally of not encouraging people out of individual performance or individual contributor roles. It feels kind of weird that, you know, you get these, it's the word Robin used, ninjas, and then you make the apex of their career management when actually, you know, they're amazing in front of clients, and why would any business want to kind of stop that?
So on that point, James, so I think that's a good one, because in our career framework, and that's also something which we changed 2 years ago, it's not the case that if you want to grow as a principal, that the only step is becoming a manager. So we made sure that as an individual contributor, you can have the same compensation package as one of the senior managers, for instance. So I think it's very important that you don't force people in a management position while they don't flourish there.
That's a great play, yeah. And Robin, like, if you could kind of wind back time, obviously we know that when we do things, a lot of the learnings, that like the lessons that we take away come with scar tissue. Like, so what are the biggest mistakes that you've made on this journey that you could potentially save someone else from?
Sure. It's not a mistake. What I can say is that you need to be very versatile. So, you know, the way the business needs solutions engineering pre-sales changes every 1-2 years. It's a different way of how you need to give your support. Maybe a mistake could be if you stick too long to one of the ways of working because you think that's the best. You know, you might have outgrown that situation already, right? So you need to be open to change. Sometimes, I think at the beginning we started with a board with tickets, and now we're into account teams where we don't have any tickets which are being picked up. So I think you need to change the way you work with your stakeholders, with your account executives. I think for me that's one of the biggest ones. And I think that the biggest thing I learned over the last 2-3 years is adding value consulting to the mix. I think solution engineering is a profession and is something you need from a product and technical standpoint. But when I started to use value consultants, because value consulting and solution engineering both is in my portfolio, when I started to combine this, that really progressed a lot. I think we have so much more success since we have value consulting as part of the group.
When you say value consulting, can you define that for everyone? Like, what is the role of a value consultant?
So basically, a value consultant helps clients identify and realize the potential benefits of its digital banking solutions. So they provide strategic feedback, they provide reports, they provide ROIs. Basically, they target the language of the customer, and they also show the customer what they can be within a few years, what they can become in a few years. And when I started working with value consultants, I was amazed about what it does. It creates a certain trust with the C-level of C-1. So yeah, I think for us, we're really every team has a value consultant and a solution engineer at the moment.
Where'd you go for a value consultant? Are you like shopping in the aisle of McKinsey and Deloitte?
Yes, you do. So you go for strategy consulting firms. Yeah.
Great. And Alexey, what are your big takeaways, your big lesson?
I think, as Robin said, being flexible, because the role and even like the names of the role, they've changed a lot over the last decade. But also, especially for the early stage companies, they're hiring someone, especially from big companies, things like Salesforce or Amazon. Don't copy things. You really need to think what really works for your organization at this stage of the growth, because with the evolution of the role, there are, of course, a lot of things that you can basically adopt. But one thing for me, looking back, I would say that underutilization of solution engineering across the organization, something that I mentioned before, like the ability to having them involved for better handovers with customer success and working closely with product management and product marketing. I think this is where the unrealized potential really sits for many organizations. And that can really change a lot of things for the company as a whole, in my view.
What's the main reason that solution engineers have been underutilized, in your opinion? Is it is that an issue with account executives or leadership not facilitating?
I would say it should be the thinking on the C-level of organization, because if the solution engineering sits within the sales organization, then what we discussed like earlier, the headcount and the other things are purely linked to just closing the deals. But you're not looking up solution engineer who can help you with churn of the customers. For example, if the implementation was going wrong because there wasn't a proper handover, or maybe unreleased upsell or cross-sell opportunities, because again, you're not bringing solution engineers in that discussion. Same things, you need to talk to your VP product and say, are they flexible with defining their roadmap, or their roadmap is pretty much just a backlog of promised things to customers? And again, there could be different things where solution engineers can have those cadence with product managers when the certain things would be put on the roadmap earlier, and it's going to be way more control on the product team. So I think all those hidden opportunities are very hard sometimes to also introduce to solution engineers unless they're being understood on the C-level. The opportunity for the leaders to talk to the VP customer success, talk to the VP product, build that relationship, and then bring that back together to the VP or to the C-suite to discuss.
Yeah. Alexey, thank you. Guys, we've run out of time here. So my most profound thanks for coming on the show. It's been wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James.
Thanks, James.